We're ready? Everybody's here. All right. So welcome everyone to this Stronger Together Meet the Scholar series. Today we're very lucky and I feel very honored to be allowed to do this interview. We have Bruce Kogut with us today and we're gonna start the interview. I will just do a little introduction and then I will interview or have a conversation with Bruce for about 45 minutes to an hour. And then we're gonna take questions. So at any point in time, feel free to put questions in the chat and I'll try and take them perhaps as we go along, but more likely we'll take the questions at the end. So welcome, Bruce. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Louise.
Let's see if I can get my slides to work here. There we go. So Bruce is the Sanford C. Bernstein and Company Professor of Leadership and Ethics at Columbia University. And he also has an affiliation with the Department of Sociology at Columbia. So he's at the Business School and at the Department of Sociology. He's also been the Eli Lilly Chaired Professor of Innovation at INSEAD and had a chaired professorship at Wharton. He's also been on the a visiting faculty position at the Stockholm School of Economics and also at the RAND Corporation. Bruce has his PhD from the Sloan School of Management at MIT and also holds an honorary doctorate from the Stockholm School of Economics. He has been a visiting scholar at numerous prestigious research institutes, including the Social Science Center in Berlin. He's been a fellow at the Institute of Advanced Study in Berlin. He's also spent time at École Polytechnique, the Santa Fe Institute, Tsinghua University and Humboldt University. At the time, it was in former East Germany.
I spent five and a half months there, Louise.
Okay, yeah. Interesting, I'm sure. Bruce has a number of awards and recognitions, and they include the Russell Sage Foundation Award. He's received the National Science Foundation Award, the Distinguished Scholar Award from the IM Division of the Academy. He's also received the GIPS Decade Award for his paper Knowledge of the Firm and the Evolutionary Theory of the Multinational Corporation. He's also a holder has received several prestigious research grants, including from the European Commission, the Max Planck Institute, and the Carnegie Boss Institute. Bruce was actually the second editor of the European Management Review and the founder of the INSEAD Social Enterprise Program. He has served on several corporate and academic boards and is now on the academic advisory board to the Institut Polytechnique in Paris. He's co-leading the computational social science research at Columbia University's Data Science Institute. So a lot of things going on. And I'm sure many of you, or most of you know already, are familiar with Bruce's research. He's published more than 60 articles in top journals. He's written 7 books on topics ranging from globalization, corporate governance to the internet economy, as well as several book chapters. He has an amazing 81,000 plus Google Scholar citations. That's really impressive. And has conducted research on a range of topics. And this is also an impressive, very impressive list on global strategy, the knowledge-based view, cultural distance, foreign direct investment, operational flexibility, real options we were talking about just a little while ago, social financial markets, network dynamics in small worlds, governance, including women on boards, computational social science. I know that at the moment, Bruce is also working on some NLP applications to political ideological bias in academics and to reviewing the Hawthorne experiments. He's also looking currently at AI, human interactions, emotions, and media. So a really impressive background. So we are very honored and happy to have you here today, Bruce. So I'm gonna stop sharing my slide. So we can have a conversation.
Right.
So we often start.
You failed to mention that you and I have known each other since you were a PhD student.
That's right, which is a long time ago. So I was at INSEAD. I started my PhD in 2000 and was there until 2004. And so in that period, I also took a course with Bruce. So we've known each other for a long time, many years. But it's been a while since I saw you now. So it's nice to see you. So we often start this interview by talking a bit about how you ended up on the academic career path. And so I thought maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about your background, where do you come from, and how did you end up on a path towards pursuing an academic career? Was there something when you were growing up that kind of set you on that path, or was it a little bit accidental? How did you get there?
Yeah, I don't know the answers to those questions, but I'll give you the factual stuff. Then we can psychoanalyze the rest as we go through. Born in New York City, Mount Sinai Hospital, which is about 3 miles from where I live right now. So I haven't traveled very much in my life, I guess. And then 10 months old, family moved out to California with my Aunt Edna and Uncle Frank. We shared a house with five kids in a place called Studio City of the Valley, for those of you who know Los Angeles. My dad was a doctor, son of a furrier, firstborn American. My mother was one of 8 children. Father was illiterate dock worker, worked in the Brooklyn yards. And when my father was doing his residency in the hospital, his father-in-law was still working in the docks next to him in the same facility. So just a little insight on the power of education. So I think that's what impressed me early in life was education. He was a Columbia student. He had the great books of the world on his shelves. So I went to a public school, 1,200 kids in my graduating class, but a bookshelf of classics at home, and that was great. My mother was a young executive at Revlon, graduate at Hunter. I said she was number 8 in the family, and she was the only one who got a college education. Some didn't even get a high school education. So she worked for Revlon. She could have been anything, I think. She's still alive, 96. Just saw her. She's glad to give anyone here advice. If you want any advice, I'll give you her number, and she'll be happy to give you some help. Amazingly sharp. So she was very sweet, but also very, eager to see her kids have an education and move forward. So I went to Berkeley, dropped out for 4 months. I think it's not surprising if you know me that couldn't really quite work things out in directions. I liked everything. I think it's problems. There was a problem, Louise, as you seem to imply. Went to Europe had a lot of fun. Saw a lot of museums actually. And then came back to US, finished up Berkeley in still 4 years, and then worked in Oakland. I wanted to tell you this because we want to talk a bit about the social implications of being an academic. I worked in Oakland, being a community organizer around consumer issues, and went back to LA briefly, and then left to do Europe again in some fashion, which more on my own, now having learned more, but also joined SIPA, which is the school of policy at Columbia. Everyone there was international. Most of them were. I didn't have a great international background. Other than these quick trips, so I learned a lot from there. It was smaller in those days, and I was able to pick up some, attitudes on things which was important to me. And then I worked for a guy named Louis Ettinger. If you don't know, he's a political scientist who made a huge difference in my life. Sometimes people give you confidence. Reinhard Bendix did this for me back at Berkeley. And then I went to MIT. I think you wanted to ask me why I chose this direction. Because I ran into economics when I was at Columbia, but since I come from a practical background with my grandparents, et cetera, my cousins, my aunts and uncles, one who ran a bar in Baltimore, I can give you more colorful stories, Louise, offline. I think business schools said to me, you can do academics, but you can also do something which is potentially helpful for the world. I wrote that in my essay, and I think it was wrong by and large.
Okay.
I don't think business schools, when I started, were particularly in that attitude. I think they have become in that direction. So many of you are engaged in CSR and ESG and other things. But that's really over the past, 10, 15 years. Even for the journals, I think that's true. But I started off with that direction, interested in doing that. And then MIT sent me to East Germany, and I learned that I could never win an argument trying to defend American foreign policy. So I gave up at that age in my life and said, I'm never going to try to defend American foreign policy, which is a good decision. But it was a great experience being in East Germany. It was not a career moving decision. I don't recommend it to you, Miros, to go get a job in North Korea and try to land something better when you get back home. But it taught me a lot about myself and about the world, which was really helpful. So is there something which I wanted to do? Yeah, I wanted to study things which were useful. I had a love for abstraction, I think, love for history. And I actually thought business school PhD was the best place to do that.
Mm-hmm. So you were saying in your application essay, you talked about you wanted to go there because you thought that business schools were useful, but then you didn't think that they were at that time. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
No, they were useful to business, which is extremely important. And I sometimes wonder whether we have forgotten that currently. But you didn't have classes which were saying, what business can do to help people, to help, welfare of people, or to move, to help us understand issues. We have to ask ourselves the question, why are there so few political scientists at business schools? And that's essentially because I think we have an instinct that talking politics or studying politics inside of business schools is actually rather treacherous. And it is, if you looked at European business schools, it always struck me that they were more right-wing than the American business schools. That includes INSEAD as well. It's changed, but that's because in Europe, socialism was a real alternative. There was a right and a left. There was governments. There was arguments for government control over industry, which are real arguments. The U.S. had our arguments, but it was often, a lot of noise. But generally, it's a fairly middle of the road kind of country. But have people come in, faculty, et cetera, and talk politics, particularly in this what was a more polite American culture about you don't speak politics if you go to a dinner party. You just didn't find these things being done, and you cannot talk about change without talking about politics.
Interesting. So I miss. So why did you choose to get to MIT? You could have gone to other schools.
I wanted more math. I felt math was missing in my education.
Interesting.
And I got a lot of math. That's one thing MIT gave me.
I'm sure at MIT, yeah.
And I relied upon, I want to tell you this, because you have Tim Fulter here who knows a bit of my history. My roommate was a guy named Nalin Kulatilaka from Sri Lanka. We've been friends forever since then. But it was just a great experience because it was 15 people in the whole school who were PhDs in every year. And it was working with other people that I learned a lot. My classes were great. Teachers, faculty were fantastic. But I've always been a good learner, if you wish. And it helps to have people who want to help you learn as well. So that was wonderful.
Absolutely. That sounds great. So what was the topic of your PhD, and how did that topic come about? Did you get some use of this math that you?
I think I just wanted to get out of these, I got this money from the U.S. government. I didn't have any financial resources, and the stipendium was pretty small. I didn't realize we could have, that eventually it would become economically interesting to be a PhD student. You should laugh at me, but it's not. But actually, it's pretty cushy compared to what it was. So I was just walking down the hallway of the Infinite Tunnel in MIT, for those of you who know the MIT building. And this says, go do something in Eastern Europe and Soviet Union and that kind of stuff. There was a Soviet Union then. And this was after my first year, and it was a great year, but I was just totally, wasted by all the effort it took. I went to class one day, and and I noticed that I was wearing 2 belts. And I was just, so exhausted. So I said, sure, that's like fun. And they gave me a stipendium. I could study German. I could go out to Germany where I took a class. Very useful because I met my wife there, which was somewhat important for me in the course of these decades. I came for the math and all that training, but still looked around a little bit more, perhaps than the usual MIT student, for other things to do, particularly in the international area.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you ended up going to the Stockholm School of Economics from there. So how did you end up there?
Right. So actually, I finished my thesis there, which was on the international trade system of communist countries. Built a little bit on a book by a guy named Frank Pryor. For those who know history, Frank Pryor was on the famous bridge, the linked up bridge between East Germany and West Germany, and he was caught by the Russians. He was arrested by the East Germans. They did a trade for Gary Powers, who was shot down on a U-2 plane. I guess maybe I read his book because I wanted to find out more about him. I was influenced by the book. And it had to do with contracts, because that's what people talked about then. I had Don Lessard for my primary advisor, and a guy named Mike Piori was also on my committee. Mike's amazing guy. I just saw him yesterday. And Don did work on stuff which is still done, is like, what kinds of contracts do you choose to which solve certain problems? The problem might be, if you invest in a country, they might nationalize your property. So how do you don't want to put in equity? What equity-like contracts can you write, which give you certain properties which are useful? As we all know from negotiation theory, you try and make the pie larger, so contracts were able to diversify risk from the country and allow you to get some percentage of return from the revenues, or however you want to write the contract. So that I applied that to East German trade. That's what I did. As someone told me, if you chose Japan, you would have been famous, but if you chose East Germany, really not that many people cared, except for the Rand Corporation, which is I let it stand in there for historical reasons, which was kind of a spy operation located in Santa Monica, California, near where I lived. So that's why it was of interest to me. Stockholm School of Economics, my God, those Swedes, those Scandinavians, Louise, they are tricky people,
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. You go to work, everyone's wearing, no one wore ties, it was casual work. And then they invite you back home and everyone's wearing a tie, There's international business. We love the world. You go back in for Christmas, they have Christmas trees with their national flags all stuck into their trees.
That's true.
It's true, especially the Swedes, which are the worst of the whole bunch. But they were, it's such a great experience, and it was nice to make money. God, it was lovely to make some money. Wasn't a lot, the gate was, they made me teach a lot. If you want to learn to teach and make 1,000 mistakes, I made all 1,000. But Sweden those days was far away from the US, so no one heard about it until 2 years later. By that time I had a job in the US, so I snuck through. And there was just great people, Gunnar Hedlund, Louise, maybe you knew him. People who were Europeans of a certain generation would know how interesting a man he was. It was a very strong tie to Europe for me for many years. I used to go back quite often to work there, including later when I met Udo. Udo came later. Udo Zander came later on the whole thing. But great experience, and but then I eventually went back to the U.S. Now, since I see Aline here, I will say that one of the great things of giving a talk at Wharton, which is where I took the job. I was offered at Wharton, I was offered at Michigan. My wife-to-be said, I don't know where Michigan is. So she said, it has to be in New York. And I said, the closest I can get to New York is Philadelphia. So she said, go go there. But in the audience was a woman named Erin Anderson, who gave me advice in my thesis, kind of theory and advice. And for the rest of the time I knew Erin, she was always giving me this advice about how to lead my career and do things correctly. So Erin was a great, became kind of that.
She was very good at giving advice. Yeah.
She was great, wasn't she? Yeah.
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 No, absolutely. Yeah.
I forgot
great
to know her,
advice
of
to
course.
PhD students. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you ended up working with Udo Sander later on, you said. And of course, some of your most cited papers are actually with Udo in Org Science in '92, The Knowledge of the Firm, Combinative Capabilities and the Replication of Technology. And you also have the Org Science page for Knowledge and the Speed of Transfer and Imitation of Organizational Capabilities. So how did those papers come about, and how did your co-authorship with Udo come about? Because like now you are then at Wharton.
Yeah, like how most people who know me know that I like to usually do the best work around 5 o'clock over a beer, and Udo had the same habit. But Udo, I might have to say something. Udo's just the most remarkable person I've met. His family is from northern Europe. Was in the German part of what is now in Poland. Family had an estate, etc. His father had a very modest job in Stockholm, but he wanted the kids to get the same education that someone would get if they lived in Germany of a certain time. So he learned how to waltz. He could play the violin. He could ride horses. I mean, the guy was just, whatever social skill of the highest level, was required. Udo had that person. So one time when I went to a conference, my mother-in-law came, who was German, and I was just suffering dancing the waltz with her. And all of a sudden, Udo came over and danced with her the rest of the night and saved my whole family relationship. So Udo was just remarkable. And he had seen, he'd gone to this conference out in California, Berkeley, where Sid Winter had spoken. It was run by David Teese. And a number of people spoke in that, including a remarkable guy named Dick Remelt, among other people. He had seen this presentation that Dick did, which became a chapter in David Teese's book, which talked about technology transfer and from Everett Rogers, and also talked about a lot of clever things that Sid, of course, always talks about and writes about. But he also talked about knowledge on that. So I'd already picked it up a little bit in the work on joint ventures, which I had done, and a little bit on the tacitness side of things. In fact, I had just read when I was doing my thesis at Stockholm that first time. I just read their book on evolutionary theory, which I think, like for many people at that time, was an interesting, coming together of org theory and economics. So it had impressed me, and they had already talked about these issues of routines and tacit knowledge and et cetera. So one thing about the Stockholm School of Economics, they had this great access to business. So we were able to run these interviews with extremely high response rates about these, these Roger-like measures of diffusion. And we were able to do it with items and creating scales and that kind of stuff. Something which I think people, don't still underestimate a lot is the value of creating good psychometric scales for using things, And economics is doing a little bit better. It's still so bad at creating scales. And you just look at short digression of the stuff being done on the routinization done by artificial intelligence put out by the Census Bureau, used by a lot of economic studies, the great studies. Often they just choose one item, which could represent something. They had no idea of scaling of using things. Now I don't want to embarrass Eileen again, but I will now quote something which Erin did tell me, and that was, she always says, I never understood, she said, why people use these fancy econometrics to deal with all these problems, when if they just had good data, good measurements, a lot of these problems would actually go away. So we hit upon that early, and I had good advice from people like Aaron and other people talking about scales, how to do these measurements, and that's what I think was important for us. It wasn't just the ideas which are known and highly cited, but it also was the empirics. The empirics came along with the ideas. They were not done separately. So we knew we were going in that direction at that time. Took us 4 years to publish the first paper. Took us about 4 years to publish the second paper. We had terrible arguments with people, but data helps. So we had that in our hands.
That's true. So when you said 4 years, was that, I assume you went to several journals? I don't know if you have some advice for some of the young scholars who are listening in in terms of publishing.
Have faith. I'm probably, many of the papers I had took a long time to be accepted, even if it was stayed at the same journal. I get a little frustrated at editors. It's always been a lifetime trait. So I have to deal with co-authors who just say, don't write that, Bruce. Take that away, that stuff out of the frustration. It's good advice not to do that. So the first was 4 years, which was a little bit too long, but it came out probably better written than it was when it went in. And Ari had a lot of faults sometimes, a little bit, not sometimes not by the book, and which could be aggravating, but also could be fantastic because he got a lot of more exploratory ideas, and it was not just exploitation, which so many journals go for, but also exploration, which he had published, by the way. Ari is the one who published that article by Jim March, which I guess was the number 15 article rather than the number 16 article. So Ari was important for that article as well. For the empirical work, the biggest problem we had was that lots of reviewers don't know statistics. We weren't doing very hard statistics. We were doing duration models, which was still not particularly well known. And you could prove to people that when you take an expectation, that having a constant within the expectation or taken out to multiply the expectation is the same thing, because the constant is not a random variable. And you could write this down arithmetically, and you still would not win your argument with reviewers, because they were onto other things. So there's a lot of ideology in fields, which is important to think about.
Interesting.
But we persisted. But Louise, I'll tell you the article I like the most we did together. That was the article on East Germany. So that it's a little, and Woody Powell told me that's the one he likes the most. And Woody's not usually kind to business school articles.
Interesting.
And we spent, and I said, I'd already known about this SICE factory thing, but Udo and I had so much fun visiting the SICE, going back to SICE just after the collapse of the wall. And we went to their archives, and we came up with these patent measures to compare things on it. So it was published in the American Sociological Review, never a high citation article, but it really is, I think it's such an interesting opportunity to look at a country split, with a company on one side of the border and the other side of the border, and then they come together. It's like a perfect natural experiment. We had fun running up that whole thing.
It sounds fun too to go and actually collect the data there, right? We spend so much time now just in front of the computer, but actually going there and getting your hands dirty in a sense with the data.
And talking to all the East Germans who just got absorbed by West Germany, how they felt about it. So it was pretty fascinating.
Sounds great. I will go back and read that paper. It sounds great. So you arrived at Wharton then. That must have been quite a change, having been in Sweden, and now you're junior faculty, and you were saying you've done your 1,000 mistakes teaching at the Stockholm School of Economics. Yeah,
so then I went on to other mistakes. So that's all, but different kinds of mistakes. Good things too. Wharton was just like Columbia was for me when I came here. Was this that kind of a low point maybe? Wasn't its reputation of before management departments are always problematic because they're dispersed and there's potential for fighting, and they're never at a stable equilibrium often. So you had to go through all that. There was Peter Lagrange, who was a Norwegian guy who ran it. Peter's was a business person, actually eventually became the head of IMD, and truly became a business person of education with selling his business to Siebes in China. So he really was but then we built a great team of people. We built, a guy named Dan Raff came, he and I were PhD buddies back at MIT. And that was a great thing. Serious person in business history, economic history. Dan Leventhal came. Dan's incredible. We had, Connie Helfat come to us, who was such a great buddy. And she did such wonderful work on the persistence of R&D. And then Sid, of course, among other folks. So the places came together nicely, and that was a very positive experience. And then we attracted all these good PhD students who came to the place. Sejin was one of them. Sejin was just, he just speaks honor. You just know he's a classic Neo-Confucian scholar. Following his code, doing his work. So I really admired that. And was happy for it. And other ones too, you mentioned me, all of us who were at Wharton were lucky to have each other, I think, but they're also very lucky to have those PhD students. It was just a great experience.
Yeah. So Sijin, of course, as you know, was interviewed also in this series, and he mentioned that he was amazed by your intellectual diversity, and he thought it was great to have been inspired by you. And now you're talking about also being inspired by PhD students. And I know working with PhD students means a lot to you. So tell us a bit about your work with PhD students.
Well, this guy named McAdaw came by Rick, and Rick was feisty as can be, probably still is feisty as can be. I just learned that he's got this new YouTube channel thing, which I got to check out. There's something to look at for sure. And Rick, he came in with his letters from Nobel Prize winning economists saying, this guy walks on ice, that's pretty good, but thin ice, sometimes too, and water sometimes, and all that stuff. So just so well trained, and such a, and it's clear why he came there. Andy Spicer, Paul Almeida, Michelle Ginneman, who I absolutely adored and adore. We still remain close friends. It's just Anka later on. I'm missing people along the way, Jae Young Sung and all these folks. But and then other people had other PhD students. It was a fairly large program compared to what we have elsewhere at CBS. So I think we put together, I'm not responsible for it. I think we put together in this crazy management department a number of PhD classes, which were good. And the school was very serious about its PhD program. There's a guy named, Aline, you think I'm pitching to you right now, but it's true. A lot of people took Hubert Gatillon's class. Jim mentioned that. But we did send our students to Hubert because he taught econometrics and how to do it. MIT was just like, equation after equation, and then you guys go figure it out, But actually having someone, have you walk through it was really great. And I should point out to you that when Harbir Singh and I did the paper on culture, we started off with Hubert's, hand-coded algorithms for doing logit analysis, which was not in Don Green's package yet. So he taught all of us a lot too. So it was a great experience to be at Wharton. It gave me a lot of opportunity as well. Hard to leave. Took me 3 years.
That's great. Yeah, I did econometrics with Hubert as well in INSEAD, because of course Aaron and Hubert moved to INSEAD. So there you go. Yeah, so they've been spreading good things everywhere. So you were a junior faculty member at Wharton. Are there, we also have junior faculty who join these talks. Are there things that you that you wish you had known then that you know now that perhaps other junior faculty could take away?
Yeah, I mean, be patient. I got a little fed up at one point because there was a lot of turmoil. Which I won't, I don't want to spend the time talking about the turmoil part, but it was a lot of turmoil going on. But it's partly had to do with gender issues, which were fairly severe at the department when, as a junior faculty member. People didn't know really how to deal with those things too well. So I just took off. I remember I went, of course, that's when I met Udo, and that's when my first daughter was born in Stockholm. So I took off, and those days the clock didn't start; the clock was still running. But it was the best spent year I ever took. Saying no is critical. Some of the faculty here at Columbia are really good at that. I think they've gotten smarter and wiser on that. But say no. Sounds good. Say no. The more tempting it is, say no. Just stay in just do your work, do the teaching. Move forward. That's the advice. Smile, be happy. Always be happy. No matter what life turns out, then you can always say, "Hey, I was happy." So that's always a strategy.
That's very good advice.
Min strategy, Rich. Is that what it is? So right.
Very good advice. So Bruce, I wanted to come back a little bit, jump back in time a little bit again. So you took over. Gerardo, you have your microphone on. Would you mind turning it off, please? So Bruce, you took over from one of the first editors, Pierre Dussorge and Niels Norderhaven at the European Management Review. And in the editorial piece that you wrote as an introduction in 2006, when you took over, you wrote that many of the top journals in management had been critiqued from being too American or narrow in their definitions of research. Do you think this has changed over the past 15 years?
I think it's changed quite a bit. I'm not sure whether Europe's changed that much, Louise. I was fully in Europe. I really left the US. I lived probably 12, 13 years of my career was in Europe and elsewhere, in Germany or in France or in Sweden primarily. And I was involved in, crossing a pond to go over to England and that kind of stuff, So Europe's so great because it has everything. It's like, I always say this to tease Europeans, so I might as well go ahead. I said, it's like, that, what's the name of that? Not Disney World, but the other thing, Florida, where you go and it's the whole world next to each other. It's like, you know what I'm talking about? It's like, what's that? Epcot, right. So they got Denmark, you got China, you got France, and it's so wonderful. Europe's a little bit that way, like, everyone's pretty close. You can take a train to go across 3 or 4 borders and things train, But really, Americans often come to Europe. Either we're naive and stupid, which I don't care if we actually live up to that so much, because naivete is underrated as a quality. Also we believe in things like, sure, why not be united, integrate? So European Management Review was kind of this run by, an American came in. Pierre did a very good job. There was a lot of national systems, rivalry of each, academic systems were particularly organized by countries. Up to this day, it's still that way. Different at the level of the MBA programs, but in terms of the national systems, it's that way. So it was hard to organize around these things. You had to go to each, I had to do accreditation things, which is, I don't know if you ever want to be cursed, do accreditation, assignments. So, and then Bologna is still being built up, this agreement in the Bologna educational system and degrees and everything. So things got, did improve a little bit in Europe, but there was a lot of too much. Europe needs a bigger market to remain Europe. So it was the time of the Americanization of things like what journals count, and I believe me, in the first list, SMJ would not have been a journal which counted, or Academy of Management Journal, because they were run by people in the disciplines, et cetera. And people like Hervé Demez, who's a close friend, who runs the Center for of research and management, and still does that in a much bigger agglomeration now. You know, people like him argue these cases to make these lists so the journals would actually count. You know, and that's been, you know, in some ways that was first looked bad for the Europeans that American journals came to Europe, but it also had a nice effect on the American journals. Suddenly you saw more and more Europeans and other people around the world who were publishing in these journals. And that's true for, you know, Asian content has increased as well, et cetera. So there has been an internationalization of the journals, not because they led it, but because they had to follow their readership, basically. And that's been a big change for the US, which has been healthy.
Interesting. Yeah. So in that same editorial, you went on to give some very good advice on what you were looking for in papers. It's an interesting editorial. I see that Xiao posted it in the chat. You should go and read it. But one of the things you said here was that it was important to clearly state the idea, clear and crisp writing was very important, and avoiding what you call proof by citations. Maybe you can talk about that in a minute. But then you also wrote that the European Management Review, you wanted to see research that addressed the important questions of our times to which management can contribute. Now, of course, this was in 2006, so again, 15 years ago. Do you think that we do enough today to address these important questions of our time?
I'm sure you do a lot more on it. I have a few thoughts on this. I know we should wrap up soon for questions and answers, but
absolutely.
You know, evolutionary systems, you know, move in a way in which you've got the open territories, and then you've got equilibria built, which creates a sustainability in each one of these niches. Sometimes the niches fail. I'm going to say something which is maybe offensive to some people. It's an area of research which I love, and that's organization theory. I think it's never established equilibrium in the management community. It's because of its ambivalence about being useful very often. It changes a little bit, but I think you know, if you say, well, I'm an OT person, I want to teach strategy, but probably in strategy, you are going to have to talk about making money. I mean, you know, someone's got to do it, right? So, if you don't want to talk about making money, then you can talk about CSR the rest of your career, which also is very important, but it's never going to be this, you know, you can just project out over the decades. That's not a sustainable career as a topic. So you have to think about what that looks like on it, which is critical. But what's also happened is that journals themselves, it's not only in management. I was just talking to a close friend, Amit Khandelwal, who used to be the editor of the Review of Economics and Statistics. It's even also true. Ben Jones at Northwestern just came out with an article, which is floating around on the increasing sizes of teams for doing research. Now, we know this from Brian Uzzi's work already, but it's true now for economics as well. Well, why are teams getting bigger? You can say getting bigger because we're multidisciplinary and things are more complicated. I don't think so at all. You know, I think we're getting bigger because, like, you know, our armies are getting more sophisticated. We've moved from the forests of Germany, you know, into modern warfare, where we've got, you know, artillery coming in, and we've got doing the econometrics, and we've got someone doing the writing, and we've got someone handling the reviews, et cetera, and so on. It's the division of labor in order to be produced, to be published. And I don't blame anyone, you know. God, if you're a junior faculty member, you have to get published to survive. Now we have wise people like Heather Berry, who sits now on boards, who will solve these problems for us. But it's a big problem on it. And the proof by citation, it was an inverted way to say something here that we probably would benefit, you know, either by more formal verbal reasoning or more formal mathematical reasoning coming in, by which we did not have to use, you know, I cited, you know, every major, you know, saint in the Catholic, you know, whatever that's, you know, when you walk into the to the wonderful European churches as evidence. So Schumpeter did say creative destruction, but like Bob Solo said, that was great. We should take out Schumpeter, once every year, parade him around the Italian village, and then put him back in the closet and then go on doing the rest of our work. And Max Weber was a long time ago. And a lot of other things like that. They do things like, citations. People might spell my name Kogut, right? So make a mistake, it happens. A typo, randomly it happens. But then it becomes systematic because no one reads the articles. They just read the citation thing, which gets replicated in the overall thing. I'm happy to be cited no matter please cite me even if you spell my name wrong. I'm happy for that. But the larger point here really is that we're gaming, right? We're gaming the system. And I'm a little concerned that the influence of psychology, since I've already said something about OT, is not a good model for a lot of things. Psychology has had this system of production of knowledge, you want to call it that, for a long time. Large teams of people, lots of articles produced, et cetera, and so on. And they've had, maybe it's because it's easier to detect, they've had an extremely high rate of failure to replicate, of p-hacking, et cetera, which is a real problem. And we're not taking that seriously enough. We are not taking that seriously enough in the way we are evaluating ourselves in so many different places. It's a bit of a bummer what I just said. We are a fantastic community of people. We deserve to drink beer at least once a week, or any non-alcoholic substance which looks like beer. That's fine too. But nevertheless, we shouldn't celebrate the fact that we've learned to create teams of well-armed people who cause fear and panic in the ranks of reviewers and journals to force them to accept their articles just because they had more citations than the other article next to it. Just trying to stimulate you guys a little bit, so I hope I've done that.
I am sure you're doing that.
Jing, did I do okay? She says yes. Cold called her. God, terrible thing to do.
There you go. So Bruce, I want to come back to some of your work because, as I said in the beginning, you've worked on such a broad range of topics, and some of the work that you've done that people may be less familiar with deals with social engagement, and I guess it also speaks to a lot of things you've talked about already, wanting to have an impact and make a difference with your work. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that.
So, I want to say a quick thing. I'm in the sociology department as well. I never took a sociology class. I'm so happy they let me in, So it's nice to have that window on social sciences and be invited to those parts of the university which don't like business schools. I just keep myself real low in the room. And I don't talk about money. And that's been a great journey too. To have that liberty to talk to different audiences. It's costly to do those things, by the way, extremely costly, because you have a lot of learning. But you picked up from me, and I know many of you, if not all of you, feel the same way. Learning is always sustains careers. You want to sustain a career, you have to love to learn. That's the whole thing. But and that's been great. And you can see from what you gave earlier, the kind of things which I'm doing on. But we underrate teaching as a way to diffuse knowledge. And teaching, I think, as you get older, gets to be particularly rewarding, maybe because we don't care as much about whether or not they love us every day, as long as they love us almost every day. It's nice getting, I have students, who have done, some remarkable things, and as all of you have done and will have in your careers. And that's extremely rewarding. And the people I do remember the most, as you will maybe too, but not all of us, you don't have to, there are great business leaders too. And I know some of those people, particularly in developing countries. And I think that there's nothing better you can do in general to help societies than create jobs, by the way. I mean, we should never get embarrassed that we're teaching business to people who are creating jobs and hopefully creating wealth creation, which is shared by society at large. We should never back away from that. So I want that to be clear, this thing about, I need my credentials. I'm not really in the business school because I do CSR, or CSR is great. I'm not picking on CSR, ESG. We also have to do the rest, but we may not do it through our research always, our journals often don't let us publish things which other journals did. We were so late in talking about so many things which already were discussed in sociology and economics just because it didn't fit someone's theory. We shouldn't give a darn whether it fits the resource-based view of the world or the knowledge-first. We just should look at sometimes at what some important issues are. And surely one of them has to be, the studies which we see happening now, in the villages of India, microfinance, we still have an amazingly few articles talking at that level of analysis, which Duflo already won her Nobel Prize for in economics, and I think these things are holding us back. So I am happy to say I have done that work. I haven't found it hard to publish this kind of work, but I don't care because there are other ways to make that contribution, such as the enterprise, social enterprise program, Louise, which you mentioned so kindly at INSEAD. I was able to run programs to train the ANC of South Africa twice in the 1990s. I was lucky enough to run a program for the Rothschild Foundation for Muslim, Jewish, and Christian dialogue. I went to a mosque, got down on my knees, and you say, I got it. I got why this is a world religion. It's a personal experience as well as experience of the people. And I'm still in touch with, Zachariah in Paris, who writes me about what his business is doing, et cetera, or working in the suburbs of Paris. So we have such opportunity in our careers. And I am proud of the research that I do. I'm a little, like all of you, I'm a little bit obsessed by it and so on. But I'm also very proud of the fact that I was able to touch people's lives, maybe help them a little bit, and they helped me as well, and make some sort of contribution through them onto society. I just think that's a great part of what we do.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so we're fast running out of time here because I want to allow that people can ask questions as well. But I want us also just to talk about some getting to know you a little bit more. And we talked about your favorite Swedish dessert or Chinese dessert. Maybe you can share with us your favorite dessert.
I already told. Well, go ahead, Louise. That was your question?
Yeah, you can answer that question. We'd love to know your favorite dessert.
I do like those salty plums from China's a big place, so maybe it only comes from the Canton area. I don't know, but that used to be where people who came from China were usually from the Canton area when I grew up. Now they're from everywhere, but there's more from Canton in those days. That was great. I don't think this, I think Swedish desserts are they have one of the highest consumptions of sugar in the world, the Swedes. If you ever walk into a Swedish store, and you can see this, if you go to IKEA, you'll see this. You get these little candy boxes, and you put your hand in, you pile it into what used to be the Saturday candy, which is now the everyday candy with a pure sweet. So, no, Louise, I think the Danes win here. They got just great.
Well, I told you I'm married to a Swede, so we have Saturday candy at our house, and we go to Sweden to buy it, like many Danes do, because it's cheaper in Sweden. So there you go. Yeah. All right. So I wanted to ask you a little bit. How have you been managing in the last year? What do you do when you're not working, obsessing about your research? What do you have some hobbies or other things that you like to do?
Yeah, I like, I'm a family-oriented guy. I've got, there's many ways to enjoy life. So people can enjoy it, all kinds of ways. I have lots of colleagues who are bachelors in, for always, they're into their 50s and they seem to be having a lot of fun and so on. But for me personally, I like having a family, and having, spending time with, being lucky enough that they don't hate us too much. They don't hate us. They like us. We get together, and COVID, and we, like many people, COVID, we found that was a really incredible resource if you were lucky enough to have that, ability to spend more time with your kids, even when you thought they were out of the house and gone. And my mother's one of 8 kids, I told you already. So I had a lot of cousins. So it's, you know, it's lots of things to enjoy in that way. You know, I did like, you know, I like sports. I like skiing. I like biking. I hitchhiked around the U.S. and Canada when I was 17 and 19. And I had a backpack, and I didn't go into the train station. I went up the mountains, went up to the Rockies, through you know, to Canada, to Jasper and Banff, to you know, over to the Okinawa Valley, where I, you know, and back through. I think, you know, nature. You know, how can you not love nature and get out there and so on? Though I know that a lot of New Yorkers don't like. A lot of New Yorkers bring their high heels to the mountains, but we actually enjoy that. So that's important to me. And of course, you know, I like culture, so I do. You know, I do like that.
That sounds nice. So you've been able to get out despite the pandemic and do some hiking, or?
If you got outside the cities, you could, you know, pretty remote. You could get onto a bike and some road and do that. And that was, for me, that was a godsend to have that chance. Yeah.
That sounds nice. Very good. All right. So I'm going to ask people if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we can post those questions. We have someone who's asking you, how would you advise new junior faculty and students to go about looking for funding? For example, if someone is based in India, it's extremely scarce to get funding or scholarships.
Is there a name attached to that, Louise? The question?
Sushan Bhagava.
Okay, Sushan Bhagava.
About this.
Thanks for asking the question, Sushant. That's great to do that, and I hope your family's all well in India, and your friends too. The business schools, some of them have money, some of them have a lot of money. Some of them have a lot of money, but use it for reasons none of us entirely understand either. So, you know, and that includes, you know, Columbia. NCI had always wanted to be a ranked research center of the world. So they always gave lots of generous funding to research, you know, which a lot of people didn't do because some of them were off doing, you know, other things, to exec ed and that kind of stuff. I must say something. I loved NCI, but I just want to make that as a real quick thing on the side. NCI is just, it's like a family, you know, who argue all the time, but they have this thing, they want to succeed collectively in what they do, and I really admire that. It's a great experience. The U.S., you know, we have if you know, the NSF has more and more money under Joe Biden. There's more money's coming the way for social sciences and elsewhere. Econ has worked out a way to have. They must have taken you know, Minyoung Zhao's strategy class, because they learn all about value capture pretty early on. We do all the value creation, of course, right? They do all the value capture on these things. So NBR is a machine. We need things like that for social sciences. I think, by the way, computational social science, data sciences is a backdoor into getting more money. If you're interested in, you know, getting money, you may want to think about things like healthcare right now, about studies in medicine, because this is going to be you know, the U.S. doubled the NIH budget in 1999, and guess what? There were a lot of sociologists who suddenly became health experts in the world. So, you know, maybe your research can have something to say useful about health. There's increasingly interest, you know, about you know, things on stress levels coming out of COVID, which with international implications. Autonomous vehicles, do they raise or lower your stress level? You know, when you walk into Disneyland, you go into one of those, you know, rides going up and down. I'm the one who screams and closes my eyes and say, Monica, next time you take the kids. I can't. You know, when we were younger, I can't do it. Some people love it. You know, could be that, you know, Rafi and Mitt loves the, you know, the entrepreneur loves that rush of risk and so on. But that is going to have, you know, consequences for health, et cetera. What's going to be the responses of firms to these issues? Aging is critical. See, Rafi's right there. You know, he's already probably has a portfolio heavily weighted in the health industry. So I would not hesitate to think a little bit pragmatically about where money is going to be allocated in funding as a way not to say, hey, I'm going to be a health expert, but what can I do to contribute to these issues and make a difference on them, and maybe help me with my career as well. I would not hesitate on that. And the Europeans, since they're never going to pull together, is going to have constantly the European Research Council stuff, giving out too much money for projects and building teams. So if you're European, I'm not worried about you, Louise. I think this CBS, your CBS, not my CBS, historically had a good bucket of money for research too, if I recall.
That's true. That's true. And we have good private foundations in Scandinavia that we can apply for money from. So Xiao has reminded me that we need to do a screenshot of everybody. So Xiao, do you want to ask everybody to
put on
there?
Yeah, put on your pictures.
Put on your cameras and smile for the camera, and then Xiao will take a picture. We're going to come back to more questions after that.
Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. And 1, 2, 3, say cheese. Awesome, got it. Thank you. Back to you.
You know, Zhao was a PhD student at Columbia Business School, and she just did such amazing work, and she still does. One of the first people to do really interesting social work using non-market strategies. It was really good advisor. Felix was a good advisor, I think, so, and other people too.
She's doing great work, and we were also very lucky to have her on the STR team. She's doing great work with us.
Right, I'm sure.
So Rich Macadok wants to make some noise here. You have a question, Rich. Do you want to put on your microphone and ask your question?
I don't actually know what the question is to ask, but can you comment on your interview with John Oliver?
I thought Rick was going to say, Bruce, did you ever work at that problem when you ran the regression on data which you forecasted already to be? Rick gave me the hardest time on one project, and it was so good, But I never forgot Rick for that particular discussion. It was a healthy, you know what I'm talking about?
I don't remember it at all.
No, God, So I'll talk to you later about the hazard model with inverse, Gaussian stuff and so on. You don't remember?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
See, he was so much younger, but he left this impression on my life without going.
Oh my goodness.
So Oliver, Nitin Noria, who I knew as a PhD student, we invited to Wharton when he was in his one more year to go before he finished his thesis. Never done that ever again. And when he went on the job market, he said, not interested in Wharton, I've already been there. I said, I'm never going to do that again. But I always followed, because Nitin was obviously, a star, candidate. But not surprisingly, he stayed in Harvard, especially in those days, even more. Harvard would send out their people to be tested, and then they would hire them, to stay at Harvard. He came up with this thing on giving a certification to MBA students when he was dean, just before he became dean, certification where they would be tested just like accountants are tested and lawyers are tested for ethics, kind of honesty among thieves, sort of, a strategy. I didn't actually really have strong opinions on it. I just didn't think it would work particularly well because I'd been asked by Bloomberg earlier. I was running this ethics center at CBS, which was a trip who calls you up for not only for advice, but to be forgiven for all the sins they have done in their lives too. So Bloomberg called up, and they wanted to have the Bloomberg screen, and they wanted to put, and while you're trading, they wanted to put up an MBA program in the corner of the screen. You imagine this, and one of them was going to be the ethics, and so what would you teach people in ethics? Aristotle, I'm the golden mean, you get to the utilitarians, You get down to Kant, everyone's favorite, deontology, because we are deontologists. Don't use that word on working people, but it doesn't work at parties, but we are deontologists, people who believe in rules and the consequences of rules on society and that kind of stuff. Smart people will ace that exam. You can give that to the CEO of Goldman. He will still pass that exam, but I wouldn't count on him being a particularly ethical individual. I don't see any Goldman Sachs employees here, so I'll just make that comment to you. And nor do I know really whether Larry Fink at BlackRock, which I think BlackRock's an amazing company, is particularly great. Although he did graduate from the high school next to mine, another public school. So all these things are great. Came to us to decide on this issue. I was already not big on this idea of certification, but I got a call and they said, look, Harvard is not willing to give us any rooms or professors to deal with this issue. Would you do it? And I said, sure, I would do it. And don't forget, my dean was Glenn Hubbard, who was on the inside job, who did not like anything on ethics and finance, so I was kind of always a little bit of a problem. So ethics was a problem. Now this is being recorded, but let it be recorded. But I did it anyhow, and they came in with the cameras, and I had 2 kids who were college age, and they thought it was the coolest thing in the world to be doing, and I have a mother who never really believed that academics is worth anything, except for accounting, and so I did it for all those people, and it was 2 hours, and they edited out what they thought was ridiculously stupid to show the world, and they got rid of the rest. There's only one thing I refused to do is when I said, John, I have a joke, and he says, well, tell us the joke. And all of a sudden I stopped and I realized I really don't want my joke recorded. He might be better at this than I am. So, but students loved it, and Rick was a fun thing to do. So, Rich, it was fun.
You seemed kind of surprised in the video that got aired.
I played my part. I played my part, Rich.
Okay.
We're all actors a little bit, So, I kind of knew I knew my job was I had to take the fall one way or another, right? I might as well be an accomplice to the whole thing.
You were the straight man.
Straight man. You had to just make sure it wasn't the hardest fall, So another,
I'll put a link to the video in the chat if anyone.
Yeah, I was going to say we'll have to go watch that video as well now. Bruce, there are 2 young scholars in the chat asking. One of them's asking about the problem of focusing your research when there's so many interesting topics. I don't know if you're the right person to ask. And the other one is asking about managing the scope of their research interests so you have longevity in academia. So they're related questions basically about how do you choose what topics to focus on, and I guess especially at the beginning of your career. So we have one question here from Antti, and the other one is from Nikisha.
So yeah, I can't advise you to do what Louise just described in terms of what portfolio. And I remember going to University of Maryland, and I think it was David Waispack who gave me the good advice a little bit too late, that that I was not optimizing my career. And there's some truth to that, because there's a book I always wanted to write back in the 90s I wrote articles on that, on diffusion of practices, et cetera, which is, you give up things. It's a trade-off in what you do, and you have to figure out who you are and what you want to trade off, and what you're trying to accomplish in your life. Some people want to just be really good, successful in whatever hierarchy exists for prestige and fame or success within academics on that. And that, for your parents or for your family, you can come back from, it might be, you become the chair of your department, which we always know is the worst job in the world to take because they have to deal with us, but it sounds good. I'm a chair of the department, or I'm a dean of the whole thing. Maybe that's what you want. So you can't, advice can only be tailored on this. I will say that there's certain things you have to ask what the costs are. So when I switched to doing more complicated stuff on networks, circa 1999, 2000, small worlds and so on, all of a sudden I realized I was talking to physicists. And I must say, the level of competition at the technical level increased a little bit more than I had anticipated. So I enjoyed it. I have books on my shelves, learning physics and all that stuff, which I love to read. But, I was not going to publish an article in Physica, it's not even their top journal anyhow for them. So, it was a bit of consumption as a tenured guy, but it's a costly thing to do as well. So you do have to think a little bit practically about what you're up to. The only time I really thought very practically was when I went up for tenure. And I was able to I have a year extra on my clock. This is a trick now, which everyone does, because I came a little bit later to start the program, the whole thing. And I'm really happy I had that extra year. I'm happy I didn't get, cocky and say, I want to go up now, took my time on that, thought about which ones would be published in the journals most clearly. Colin Kemmerer, maybe it's a name which means something to many of you, gave me the advice when you get back a review to drop everything else in your life and just do the damn review to get it published as quick as possible. So if you're pre-tenure, you really this is your time to be an optimizing animal. You drop all other brain cells, get rid of everything else in your brain. You're just going to be an animal, and you're trying to maximize your caloric intake so you can run faster than you ever run before. And that's what you should be doing. And after that, it's your life to spend and decide what you actually want to do and pursue. But you can it's just something to think about. Just be pragmatic. If having a job, if tenure means a lot for you, which maybe it should not mean that much to you, if it means a lot to you, then you should be optimizing very carefully, given that you have a deadline.
Yeah. Heather has a follow-up question, I think, to this discussion. Could you ask this question, Heather?
Oh, I'm sorry. You were going to call me. Okay. So I think you stated, Bruce, something like CSR is not a topic that's sustainable over a career. Maybe I misheard you, but I think I heard.
That's what I said.
Can you expand on that, especially for people who might be focused on that topic right now?
I think it's a great thing to be focused on because it's has a lot of energy. So one thing I left out is that I always think you should, if it's not too expensive to do so, you should gravitate to areas which are intellectually, I can use the word hot, but hot sounds like, like it's superficial. But, I just got lucky to be at MIT when continuous time finance was breaking out. It had a big effect on me. Tim gets it. I would not have known options. When I got to Wharton, the idea of thinking that way was still very, very different than the discounted cash flow way of talking finance here, which, by the way, was the first class I taught. It was at Stockholm, was in finance. So that's how I walked in, and that was a great background. But why should I have done anything else when you had Robert Merton, you had Fisher Black, you had Stu Myers there? I mean, you should try if you want to, particularly when you're a doctoral student, you have the time and the drive to do it. You should learn a little bit along the way, Heather. So that was really critical. When we went to Wharton, it was Sid Winter. We went to NCI, it was social enterprise, and back here it became, I think, building one of the best strategy groups we have in the country around behavioral economics, and also I think increasingly more about computational social science. So this makes sense. CSR, I don't think it's of this depth what I just described to you right now. This is not like it's a topic which the world badly needs. It suffers from ideological balance. There's too many liberals who do this in the management field. There are too many conservatives who do that in the accounting field. And econ is probably split on the whole thing. But you really have to persuade me that a CSR article is good science, given the ideological motivations which people walk into doing that. So when Vanessa Burbano, my really great colleague, came up with an article now published in Management Science that CEO activism is not always a good thing. I said to Vanessa, I believe you on that one, Vanessa. I really, because that's exactly opposite what she had been publishing up to that point. CSR has yet to migrate to something which gives me that confidence that people are not ideologically motivated or not career driven, knowing that the reviewers are ideologically motivated. But when we get past this point and the world gets greedy once again, or maybe because of climate change, Heather, it's less until we all disintegrate into whatever is gonna happen. But normally, I don't think that's gonna last that would normally not last 2 or 3 decades. And I can prove that to you because you'll see that people talked CSR 30 years ago. They talked it back in the 30s. You know, what was the human relationship school which came out of Harvard and the Hawthorne studies? And they talked about it back in England in a period of time. Partnerships were built out of religious urge to create better forms of sharing the wealth among people who belong to the firm. It was a religious movement, truly a religious movement. You know, why I don't think this is it's a cyclical. I don't see it as a sustainable area of.
But if it is truly close to someone's heart and that is what they are very interested in, then you be doing sort of good research, scientific research, experiments, doing something like it would make sense for someone to pursue that as a career if it's something that they really feel strongly about.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yep.
You want me to say that? Want me to say that? I'll say that. You know, you should.
Oh no, I don't want you to say.
You should definitely be happy, Heather.
Yeah, exactly. There's tensions across some of the advice here. I'm just trying to make sure people are.
My world advice is be happy and make others happy. So
Okay.
I'm not here to make anyone miserable on this issue. But you know, someone came out in a competing YouTube thing to the amazing Rick McIndock channel, and that is the passion is overrated. We always say follow your passions. No. What you really have to think about is I got this. Humans develop brains late, right? And late into life, the brain is still growing up until For men, I don't think certain parts of the brain ever fully develop. But we all know about that problem. But generally, otherwise, and then at some point, your brain begins to decay. And by the way, I'm a certain age. I read very carefully what parts of your brain decays and what does not. What goes, how much it sustains in terms of careers or what can be done. And when you look at averages, you also, when you get older, you'll start looking at variances and say, oh, there's a variance. I want to be in that part of the distribution. So what do? I do what my 96-year-old mother does. I eat nuts and berries and lots of yogurt, that kind of stuff. So you can do all that stuff, Heather. You can be wise about how you think about your career. But if you want to have a learning career where you expand as a person, I'm so happy that I ran into Bob Engels when I was at MIT, who did not teach me econometrics. And I wish I had Uber, but he was not Uber either. He really taught me the fundamentals of mathematical statistics. So happy he did that. Because you had that basis early in your career. When new things happened, you say, oh, that's using the exponential. And that's using the exponential. Why are they using the exponential in these things? Or there's something called a power law. So this is what I would argue for. And I don't think CSR has that sort of depth, either in the technical side but maybe on the philosophical side. No,
thank you for expanding. And I completely agree with you. Learning for life is really the key, and in addition to happiness, but continuing to learn.
And I'm trying to say these things with a little bit of provocation because that's what people remember. So
it always works.
Well, hopefully that's why we're academics, because we're interested in learning and continuing to learn.
And provoking losers.
Yeah. I agree. So we're running fast out of time, but I wanted, Tim Folter had 2 questions here, but you recently mentioned the Hawthorne experiments, and he's also asking if you could tell us about the work on replicating the Hawthorne.
I want to say one thing real quick. I don't want you to walk away thinking that I, by any means, trivialize the overall social challenges we have in general. That's not what I said, okay? So all I said is a little area, and maybe it's because I actually don't believe corporations are really good or bad. I just, there are actors in the economy. I want to clear that. I think we as people, so maybe this was Louise gave me an opportunity to say that more clearly earlier, and I blew it. We have a big obligation to make sure that we are addressing in our lives and in our careers major social issues, Heather. So that's for sure, and that's sustainable. You know, that's a different issue on the whole thing. So Tim was asking me, Louise, again, could you prime me again on?
About the work on replicating the Hawthorne experiments.
So a lot of us are aware that we've been working with numbers for when they exist, and that the speed of finance over management has been so much greater than ours because they have data, they have numbers, right? And not numbers not even at the second level, at the millisecond level these days to do that. We don't have that, you know, trade or whatever it is you want, or measures of happiness. We don't have that data on that. The humanities often became the best, you know, look at movies on AI, artificial intelligence. Look at how much wonderful movies came out discussing AI, the issues for ethical choices of that, you know, machine, which had to decide whether or not terrible motif of whether to bomb a city or not bomb a city was an assassination, and the ethical choices made back and forth. That's 10, 12 years old. We weren't even close to those things. Humanities was particularly rich on that, but would never persuade each other on those areas. But we now have the ability to go back in time, if to the extent we can't record voices. Maybe someday we'll gather the radio waves of Lincoln talking, you know, in some, you know, other galaxy, you know, solar in the existence. But we don't have that ability. We do have text, and text is data now. Our tools for using it is still incredibly crude. But we can't do that. We have photographs. We're very good at facial recognition, a little bit too good. We have 99.9% ability to recognize trained algorithms to identify faces on that. So this is just exploding over it. Hawthorne was came out of Germany in the application of science to the social sciences in the late 1870s, 80s, et cetera. And they went on to found as Germans came to the US, they founded the major psychology journals. It's really interesting. Hawthorne was built upon that aspiration, the same things the Germans were doing 50 years ago, lighting issues, rest breaks, you know, et cetera on that. And they had this data, and they came out with the Hawthorne effect, saying these experiments didn't matter. You know, it didn't matter because they could never find any result on the whole thing. But people's productivity kept on increasing, like they increased in that Norwegian firm back in at Herndal, which used to be called the Herndal effect. These sort of learning curves. But now we actually have data to look at these 5 operators. They also did surveys overall, and look at what they actually said to each other. You know, what their interviews were, or what they're saying to each other. And there's other kinds of data like that, you know, existing. The Germans have lots of data of diaries of workers. German history has been on that, social history has been on that for a long period of time. And so historians are now beginning to learn how to do this. So that's a huge thing for us, you know, and we're going to do it terribly. We're going to do it so badly, it's going to be embarrassing. You look back upon it. The algorithms are miserable on the whole thing, but we'll get better. We'll have collective learning on the whole thing. And it's a new frontier. So we're looking at the Hawthorne papers, the interviews, and using that as a way to see if there's another story going on other than what these 5 very clever women were saying to these very, very silly men in these interviews, largely men, women occasionally too. But they manipulated these guys that you cannot believe. And hopefully, you know, their moods, their attitudes, their solidarity will come out in their interviews in the text, which was not what the scientists in the room were collecting as well. So that's the aspiration of the project. I want you to know, I very rarely ever talk about what I'm working on, because my failure rate is extremely high on projects. And it also makes me nervous doing that too, because it sounds like I actually know anything. I don't know anything this time, but but since you asked me, and it's Tim and Louise read it to me. Louise knows how much I value her partnership over the years. I answered the question, so that's my response.
We appreciate that. Thank you. So it sounds a little bit like you're coming back to some of the earlier German roots. It's coming full circle.
Coming back
And your
to
stay in Europe had a big influence on you, as you said earlier.
You know, as you know, I adore Europe.
Hmm.
And
so you think that makes? Yeah, no, I guess I heard you say earlier too that sort of having spent time in different places also opens perhaps up your mind to looking at different things and different topics and from different perspectives.
Right. You know, I mean, so I'll close. Maybe we're closing here around here, but you know, in our classes, China comes up. We should be really careful what we say about China. Really careful, not only because for spooky reasons, you know, which is true, and as it is for in general, you should be careful these days in what you say, but also because we're gonna there's so much misunderstanding of the whole thing, and our students often come from China. Either they're studying here or they're online. They're actually in China taking our classes, and we're having these discussions on the whole thing. So this is a good time to, as a counter-cyclical sort of investment on our parts, make sure we're even more attentive to globalization in the positive sense, but even more importantly, to the intercultural aspects of what we do. You know, it's manifest destiny right now for China. There will be mistakes made, as we Americans have made our mistakes, as Europeans have made the mistakes. And that's going to last for the next decades or 2 or 3 decades. So it's really important that we build the bridges out to them ahead of time. And I'll give you one last story, Louise, and I'll leave you alone. At the end of World War II, there was a meeting of the leaders of the European countries. There was Gaspari from Italy. There was Schumann from France. There was the Scandinavian delegates as well, who were all trained in the German language. And that's what they spoke in. They spoke in German after the end of World War II for that particular language. So we're going to be in that area with great problems as we go forward. But we have to really understand that we need to create a Latin to allow us to communicate with each other. I know it's a heavier answer than you wanted, but that's how I see one of the major challenges facing us right now. Europe can be a good model.
Let's hope so. All right. Thank you for that. And I would be happy to be talking to you for the rest of the evening. It's evening here, it's morning where you are. But thank you so much, Bruce, for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thanks, Bruce.
Zhao, thank you for organizing. You'll tell us when the next Meet the Scholar interview is. But Bruce, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today and for asking good questions.
Thank you so much for asking me. It really is a great honor, particularly since it came from Zhao and Louise and Tim and all the rest of you. Thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you, Zhao. All right.